Hello, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives. And this morning at 11:02 a.m., February 16th, 2023, and thought I would share with you some of David Livingstone's work. Um, I have made reference before to this book called Black Terror, White Soldiers, Islam, Fascism, and the New Age by David Livingstone. And as you can see, it is quite a volume. Let's see, over 600 pages. And nevertheless, I've worked my way through quite a lot of it, as you can see from my yellow highlights. And that's because he's a darn good writer and he's put an awful lot of stuff together that is very helpful to us that are trying to see behind the curtain. Um, and about a month ago, I found out that he has a website as well in which he adds some of uh, his book, his writing from the book to other thoughts, and has really done a fantastic job. I'm always happy to run into somebody that has done all the work ahead of me so that I can just take advantage of it and try to, take what I can use and move forward, as opposed to having to do it all by myself. And that is why we have the McDuff Library, which has grown an awful lot this past summer as I find it just necessary to have books. You think about Kindle and realize that Kindle is a word that means burn, and it is a reference to Fahrenheit 451. It is a reference to uh, the coming darkness in which the books will be burned. And I don't take that lightly. I think we need to have real books in our hands. And as convenient and lovely as it is to just pick up a Kindle or an iPad and read something there, um, and I'm not against that. I'm just saying, I really feel like it's important for me to maintain an actual library in honor of my father's own style, which was to always have a paper copy of everything. Um, when computers came along, the idea that we would entrust all of our important records to digital means, digital computers that can be manipulated, just wouldn't have occurred to him. He would have had, file cabinets, as he did, the famous file cabinets with the 68,000 files. So, which is to say, I'm delighted to have the Patreon that allows me to buy 4 or 5 really good books every month, and to keep in touch with you guys through the Patreon. I have to admit I don't put a lot up there because I'm more focused on current content. I'm looking forward to this evening to an interview by uh, on TNT Radio, which will be recorded and it be interviewed by Rovye Jorvik, who is a very active on Twitter and got in touch with me. So we'll be doing an interview this evening. Again, that'll be pre-recorded, so I'll let you know when it's going to play on TNT Radio. So, without further ado, let me get over myself to the ordoabkeo.ca, which is Canada, right? So it's a Canadian website, and it's just ordoabchao.ca. And I'm going to share the screen because there's some nice images and things to go along. And well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Corky and Christy, and 21 other people looking in, according to the tab up here on my YouTube channel. I don't know how many of you are on Facebook, but welcome to you, and thank you for joining my Facebook at McDuff Lives. Had a great conversation with Mark Kulak offline yesterday, and things are finally starting to come together in terms of big picture stuff. But let's postpone that for when I see him. I think it's either next week or the Wednesday after that Mark and I will get together for a a one-on-one conversation. It'll be a Wednesday night, and looking forward to that. Oh, that'll be the first Wednesday in March. Okay. Pardon me. I should use the mute button now that I've got a mute button. Some of y'all have been with me before I had a mute button, and things have really changed, haven't they? But I still haven't gotten the habit. I also, while mentioning interviews, I've had two other very enjoyable interviews. Tommy's podcast on Rumble interviewed me, and that's over on Rumble at Tommy's podcast. And yesterday, I was interviewed by Courtney Turner from her website, CourtneyTurner.com, and that will play in the next few days. Also, primarily on Rumble, people are, uh, both of them were kicked off of YouTube. And so I'm very glad to be on Rumble myself now. And hopefully, there are going to be live shows on Rumble very soon as I can get it set up. But you know me with technical stuff. I don't do it quickly. It's always a little bit of a challenge. But I have a lot of help from my wife and from the great jumping mouse. Anyway, I think things are going just fine. If you want to know where the calendar is, it's on screamingospreys.com. And you want to know what's going on? Well, if you look at the calendar, you'll notice that I'm taking a week off. The first week of March, I'll be gone. We are going to go out to Arizona together, Marcia and I, and visit some relatives and hopefully get a peek at the Grand Canyon for the first time in my life. So let's get over to David Livingstone's website, and I will put it up on the screen. And this happens to be out of volume 5 of his book called Ordo Ab Chao, which is again online. And I just want to read the text of it. It begins, and I'm going to make it a little larger, a lot larger. Okay, that looks like it's going to work just fine. Now, the topic for today is transhumanism. And I think if there's any one word that defines the difference between the major approaches to life and the future and what's going on politically and geopolitically, it might be this word transhumanism. Um, you've heard of all these things like the singularity, Ray Kurzweil, the the Borg, um, your general science fiction ideas about the future, and uh, then always the dream of eternal life. Well, all of those things are real and they're part of what's going on in the world today. And to tie those vague concepts in with what's actually happening in the world, I turn to other people, writers such as David Livingstone. So let's dig into this chapter. It's called Omega Point. The coining of the term transhumanism is erroneously attributed to Aldous' brother Julian Huxley in a 1957 article. However, as pointed out by Olivier Dard and Alexandre Moati, the first to use the term was Jean Coutreau, head of the Synarchic Empire movement. Synarchy, remember our studies of the Synarchy, the Synarchic Empire movement, and founder of the CHSP, based on his promotion of the fascist doctrine of the new man. In 1935, Contour published De Quo Vivre, which outlined his vision for a new order based on what he called new humanism. According to Jackie Clark, quote, in its various forms, this vision of a new humanism emphasized the relationship between the individual and the collective, and the need to take account of the spiritual or non-traditional dimensions of human personality, unquote. According to Contreau, the engineer would play a central role in establishing this new order, serving as what he called engineer in human sciences. Coutreau's central concern was that the human sciences had not kept pace with that of the material sciences. In his 1936 book, L'Humanisme économique, he argued for the reorganization of the economy by experts in the interest of human need. In other words, technocracy, right? At the heart of this activity was the promise of the advent of a, quote, mystic of the future, unquote, to regenerate the human species, quote, transhumanism. The central objective of the CSHP, the Center for Study of Human Problems, which he founded with Aldous Huxley, with support from, drumroll, the Rockefeller Foundation. The word transhumanism was first mentioned at a conference hosted by Coutreau in 1939 in Pontigny Abbey, founded in 1114 by Hugh of Macon, who later joined his friend Saint Bernard de Clairvaux at the Council of Troyes in 1128 to officially approve and endorse the Templars on behalf of the Church. Now, I didn't know about you. I did, of course, know Saint Bernard of Clairvaux as the principal founder of the Knights Templar, along with a man named Stephen Harding, an Englishman. So, 1128, Council of Troyes, official approval of the Templars on behalf of the Catholic Church. According to Coutreau, transhumanism would be a gathering around the truth of the various human types: sensory, conformist, intuitive, and rationalist. That means individual types. As man has evolved, so will he continue to transform himself. The future sciences of man that Coutreau calls for would make it possible to better understand this humanism in evolution towards a transhumanism. Empirical science will serve to explain human behavior, empiricism, okay, and therefore lead the foundation of a rational organization of humanity. Thus, Coutreau's conference concluded, all these aspects of various humanisms constitute what we call transhumanism. Coutreau wrote in a letter to Alexis Carrel in 1939, please accept, my dear doctor, the expression of our most sympathetic and transhumanist feelings. The combined influences of the concept of on the concept of transhumanism derive from the idea of a man transcending his human condition towards union with God. According to the two authors, the idea derives from Coutreau and Julian Huxley's close friend and member of the CSHP, the French paleontologist and Jesuit Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. You've heard of him, de Chardin. Chardin wrote in his 1949 book, The Future of Mankind, quote, liberty, that is to say, the chance offered to every man, parentheses, by removing obstacles and placing the appropriate means at his disposal, close parentheses, of transhumanizing himself by developing his potentialities to the fullest extent, unquote. The second influence is from a secular and scientific inspiration, that of man surpassing the human condition thanks to science and technology. That is Julian Huxley's Religion Without Revelation, quote unquote, a religion of man. Julian was first director of UNESCO, a founding member of the World Wildlife Fund, and the first president of the British Humanist Association. Teilhard de Chardin was also the primary inspiration behind both the New Age movement and the creation of the Internet, a project associated with cybernetics and MK Ultra. Considered the quote Catholic Darwin unquote, Teilhard is known for his attempt at synthesizing Christianity and the theory of evolution. Okay, we're going to stop and just take a breath and kind of put together some of the studies we've done in the past with what I've just read, okay? First of all, Teilhard is a Jesuit, and so that we should make reference to our reading of Rulers of Evil by Tupper Saucy to put in context who are the Jesuits and what are they about and why do they often do things that seem to be contrary to the teachings of the church. One of which is the idea of altering mankind. Because according to the church, God created man in the image of God. So if man is now going to start playing with man, man is usurping the role of God. And that would be completely against the teaching of the Roman Catholic Church, except for it seems to me that that's what the Jesuits do, is that they will, as we were talking about James Comey the other day, adopt an attitude that in order to be a good Christian, one must sin. One must do evil to accomplish a greater good. And history shows that the Jesuits are willing to do that and to use all of the techniques of Machiavelli to achieve their aims. So Teilhard, put him in context. He's a Jesuit, right? Considered the Catholic Darwin. Well, I'd never heard that, but well, that tells you, right? I mean, Darwin, what could be less Catholic than a Darwin? Teilhard, who was trained as a paleontologist and geologist, took part in the infamous Peking Man and Piltdown Man, the largest academic scandal in history that attempted to substantiate the truth of Darwin's evolutionary hypothesis. Teilhard was closely associated with Aldous' brother Julian, who wrote the introduction to Teilhard's Phenomenon of Man in 1955. According to Julian Huxley, revealing his Kabbalistic outlook, wrote, quote, evolution is nothing but matter becoming conscious of itself, unquote. And here the Kabbalah is already into our text. Teilhard's reading of Henri Bergson's The Creative Evolution was, he said, the catalyst of a fire which devoured already its heart and its spirit. The book provides an alternate explanation for Darwin's mechanism of evolution, suggesting that evolution is motivated by an élan vital, a vital impetus that can also be understood as humanity's natural creative impulse. James intended to write the introduction to the English translation of the book, but died in 1910 prior to its completion. In spite of being critical of him, de Chardin regarded James's position as somewhat akin to his own. And here's a picture of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, Jesuit paleontologist, member of the Synarchist CSHP, examines a skull he found in China. Teilhard de Chardin laid the ground for aspirations of creating artificial intelligence by arguing that as mankind organizes itself in more complex social networks, the noosphere will grow in awareness. Now, there's an interesting word, the noosphere. It has been used in different contexts. The Schiller Institute folks write about the noosphere of Vernadsky. However, that is not the only use of the term. This idea of the noosphere generally means that the biosphere itself has a consciousness, or it is alive, and that we are, when we act, we are acting as part of a greater thing called the noosphere. Simple, inaccurate, but a general idea you can work with. Um, the process culminates in the goal of history, which he referred to as the omega point. This is Teilhard's omega point, which posits that all the organisms on Earth will reach a higher evolutionary point by merging into one planetized spirit, when humans would merge their collective intelligence into one supermind through computer technology as a necessary first step in the collective evolution of the universe. This is the technocrats. These are the empiricists applying computer technology to mind control. For the movie The Exorcist, the interior of the room at Georgetown of Damien Karras, the young priest and psychiatrist who assists Father Marin, was a meticulous reconstruction of King's corridor Jesuit room in New North Hall at the university. Every element of King's room, including posters and books, was recreated for the set, including a poster of Teilhard de Chardin. The character of Father Lancaster Marin was also based on Teilhard. Parts of the plot were themed on Teilhard's theory of evil, or the existence of Satan in the world, possibly being Lucifer, or matter-energy spirit, working out its salvation through the process of physical evolution ending in Teilhard's omega point. Canadian media theorist Marshall McLuhan, who was also influenced by the ideas of Desjardins, is known for coining the expressions, quote, the medium is the message, and the global village, and for predicting the internet as an extension of consciousness. McLuhan tutored and befriended Jesuit priest Walter Ong, a friend of Desjardins, who would go on to write his PhD dissertation on a topic McLuhan had called to his attention. Ong would also later become a well-known authority on communication and technology. Teilhard de Chardin also influenced Arthur C. Clarke, who explored transhumanist ideas in his 1968 novel 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is widely considered to be one of the most influential films of all time. In his 1962 book, Profiles of the Future, Clarke predicted that the construction of what H. G. Wells called the world brain would take place in two stages. Clarke identified the first of these as the construction of the World Library, or Wells's Universal Encyclopedia, accessible to anyone from their home on computer terminals by the year 2000. Well, I suppose if you think of Wikipedia as a reliable source, or if you are foolish enough to accept it as a universal encyclopedia, then, they've gone a long way towards accomplishing that. However, I think most people are skeptical enough not to rely upon this world library, not yet. In the second stage, the world library would be incorporated into the world brain, a super-intelligent, artificially intelligent supercomputer that humans would be able to interact with to solve various world problems. Well, hello, Klaus Schwab. Hi, you want to put some chips in my brain so I can communicate with the great world brain? No problem. Yeah, just stick them in there. Okay. Arthur C. Clarke, along with OTO, and you know what that is, that's that Aleister Crowley British um, Chatham House psychological manipulation thing, the OTO, member Robert Heinlein and Isaac Asimov, one of my favorites, is considered one of the big three of science fiction. In the seminal short story by Isaac Asimov, The Last Question, parentheses, in the book Robot Dreams, humanity merges its collective consciousness with its own creation, an all powerful cosmic computer. The resulting intelligence spends eternity working out whether, quote, the last question, unquote, can be answered, namely, can entropy ever be reversed? When the intelligence discovers that entropy can be reversed, it does so with the command, quote, let there be light, unquote. I must admit that just went right over my head. I don't know what that was about. Cybernetics. Teilhard writes briefly but positively about computers and the young science of cybernetics. Between 1930 and 33, fellow CSHP, that's the Synarchists, member Sergei Chakotkin held a 3-year research scholarship at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Medical Research in Heidelberg, where he worked on a project called MT, a manual computer, which therefore places it as one of the forerunners in the field. In 1944, with Dr. Morris B. Sanders, Chakotkin would co-found the Science Action Liberation to fulfill the, quote, plan, which coincided exactly with the ideas of Wells' open conspiracy. H.G. Wells' famous open conspiracy is the technological conquest of humanity through open action so that we see what they're doing, but we don't interfere. And sooner or later, they've got past their tipping point and they have that world computer and world control. Wells's open conspiracy. Sanders had been involved in the OSS, which was also a board member of the Carnegie Endowment. Oh, no, not which was, but Sanders was also a board member of the Carnegie Endowment. Sanders pitched Chakotkin's MT computer to various influential people. Sanders also met Vannevar Bush, one of the pioneers in the development of the computer, particularly known for his engineering work on analog computers. During World War II, Bush headed the U.S. Office of Scientific Research and Development, OSRD, through which almost all wartime military R&D was carried out, including important developments of the Manhattan Project. His office was considered one of the key factors in winning the war. He is known in engineering for his work on analog computers and for founding Raytheon. Bush became vice president of MIT and dean of the MIT School of Engineering in 1932 and president of the Carnegie Institute of Washington in 1938. Bush was so impressed by the similarity of their respective ideas that he immediately proposed an article for the magazine, The Scientist Looks at Tomorrow, in which he would focus on the extraordinary possibilities that would open up by mechanizing Chakotkin's MT machine. Bush is also known for the invention of the Memex, an adjustable microfilm viewer with a structure analogous to that of the World Wide Web. In 1945, Bush published As We May Think in the Atlantic Monthly, in which he predicted, quote, consider a future device for individual use, which is a sort of mechanized private file and library. It needs a name, and to coin one at random, Memex will do. A Memex is a device in which an individual stores all his books, records, and communications, and which is mechanized so that it may be consulted with exceeding speed and flexibility. It is an enlarged, intimate supplement to his memory. Well, hello to my iPhone, right? In 1940, cybernetics pioneer and Macy Conference participant Norbert Wiener, or Wiener, I guess it's Wiener, offered his services to Bush. and referred to Bush's work in, quote, cybernetics or control and communication in the animal and the machine. From 1952, Warren McCulloch, who was then working with Andrea Puharich's Round Table Foundation, yes, the Round Table, in the investigation of psychic phenomena on behalf of the CIA, also worked at the MIT with Wiener, where together with Walter Pitts, they made pioneering contributions to the fields of computer science and artificial intelligence. McCulloch, who served as chairman of the Cybernetics Group conferences, was the guiding spirit of cybernetics in the United States. McCulloch was also a founding member of the American Society for Cybernetics and its second president during 67 to 68. The inaugural dinner chairman was Frank Fremont Smith, the medical director of the CIA front, the Josiah Macy Foundation. John von Neumann was one of the few scientists with full knowledge of the Manhattan Project's true purpose and helped select the target sites for the atomic bomb drop in Japan. He also served as a consultant to Standard Oil, IBM, the Atomic Energy Commission, the Air Force, Los Alamos Labs, RAND, and the CIA, among others. He is credited with the equilibrium strategy of mutual assured destruction, or MAD. He helped to develop electronic numerical integrator and computer, that is the ENIAC, the first the electronic general purpose computer, which was used to do computations for the hydrogen bomb. He was also central to the development of the idea of neural nets, the conceptual forerunner of the Internet. During a Senate committee hearing, he described his political ideology as, quote, violently anti communist and much more militaristic than the norm, unquote. He was quoted in 1950 remarking, quote, if you say why not bomb the Soviets tomorrow, I say why not today. If you say today at 5 o'clock, I say why not 1 o'clock, unquote. Wiener referred to cybernetics as the study of control and communication in machines and living beings. Arturo Rosenbluth, an influential member of the core group at the Macy conferences, again, that's CIA, right? Speaking on behalf of John von Neumann and his mentor Norbert Wiener, had proposed to gather together a group of scientists to devise experiments in social control based on the assumption that the human brain was merely a complex input-output machine and that human behavior could, in effect, be programmed on both an individual and societal level. All right, now we're getting into mind control on a mass scale. And how far have we drifted away from the positive ideas that were expressed by the people at the beginning of this chapter, where recognition of the spiritual and incredibly uh, the non-material part of humanity was the goal. Now it seems that the empiricists have taken over the project, and instead of enhancing the human in a spiritual and as well as materialistic way, it becomes a project for controlling, and the spiritual side has been cast out of the discussion. Wiener wrote two books which would define cybernetics as a scientific field of interdisciplinary study. His first book, published in 1948, was Cybernetics, or Communication and Control in the Animal and the Machine. The book discusses the relationship between man and machine as developing symbiotically through what Wiener called feedback loops, where each relayed information back to the other to adjust their performance. It was therefore also concerned with the possibility of machines augmenting humans. Thus, Wiener's book is believed to have laid the theoretical foundation for robotics, computer artificial intelligence, and the Internet. You know, by coincidence, I was looking at some of the the later Picard shows about Star Trek with, well, uh, Captain Picard, right? Everybody knows Captain Picard, and the topic of that show uh, was right along the lines of what we're reading about here. Um, the danger, the problem that the good guys were facing in that show last night was synthetic humans, and that it was a really bad idea. And it destroyed like the Romulans, and the idea that we would create synthetic humans, thinking it was a good idea, and have them turn on us is, that's the plot. Remember our friend Data, the cybernetic engineer on the Enterprise? He always wants to know, is he fully human? And well, if all it is wires and circuits and electricity, I would have to say no. But that is the core of, what they're doing. You have people that are motivated, maybe just out of pure scientific inquiry, to go there, to create this cybernetic human. And when you do that, what are the consequences to the spiritual side of the rest of us? Are the Romulans right in warning us not to create those synthetic humans? Because they're going to be smarter than we are. The chapter concludes with a discussion of the possibility of self-replicating machines. Now, self-replicating viruses, maybe? The theological implications of this idea were further explored in God and Golem, Inc. That is a 1964 publication where Wiener compares the creative power of God with that of man creating machines, and machines ultimately reproducing themselves. Among the symbols featured on the front cover is a Masonic all-seeing eye. Wiener suggests that that resistance to these ideas is rooted in the same prejudices that once stigmatized magic, and draws parallels to the practices of the Black Mass, as well as the Golem of Kabbalistic legend and Goethe's The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Golem, of course, probably refers was referred to in the character in the Lord of the Rings, and the idea is a soulless human or a soulless being, a golem of Kabbalistic legend. So once again, bring in the Kabbalah. And Goethe's The Sorcerer's Apprentice, Mickey Mouse with his magic broom. According to Wiener, if we adhere to all these taboos, we may acquire a great reputation as conservative and sound thinkers, but we shall contribute very little to the further advance of knowledge. It is the part of the scientist, of the intelligent man of letters, and the honest clergyman as well, to entertain heretical and forbidden opinions experimentally, even if he is finally to reject them. Quote unquote. However, Wiener also sounded the warning about the potential threat of thinking machines overtaking humans. Wiener proclaimed the advent of a second industrial revolution, which would bring about fully automated factories running without human assistance, and which he believed carried, quote, great possibilities for good and for evil, unquote. That's what we were talking about last night with Carol and Corky about this amazing energy power that comes from directed resonance that, according to the reports we read last night, were used to destroy the USS Thresher submarine in 1963, that have the potential of causing earthquakes and destroying things on a very large scale, a science that supposedly is known to the Soviet Union and perhaps them even better than we understand it, according to what we were discussing last night. A very interesting idea with Carol and Corky. Now, it's the part of the scientist to investigate these forbidden things, even if ultimately he's going to reject them. So, does that mean that we have to investigate creating a pathogen that cannot be defeated by current antibiotics or other medical techniques that completely will destroy everybody that it touches without any way to stop it? Does that mean we need to create that thing just because we're scientists, because we have to study everything, or else we're not very good scientists? Reminds me of another Star Trek episode, one of the early ones, about V'ger. I don't know if you remember Star Trek V'ger, but what it was all about was this spacecraft that went about. Um, its reason for being was to study and understand everything. So whenever it ran into something that it didn't understand, it it grabs it and takes it apart and internalizes everything that's in it, but it destroys the thing that it's studying. Is that what's going on here? Are we at the point where we're going to take the risk of destroying what we're studying just to advance knowledge? Because there exactly is where the problem lies. Do you think knowledge is more important, or do you think God is more important? Would you rather understand your relationship with the infinite and God and spiritual life, or would you rather understand how to destroy life? Not that you're going to do it, just that you had to do the intellectual exercise of going through and say, okay, I could build this thing just to enhance my knowledge. I just think it's insane that we have so many scientists employed in destroying humanity in every way that you can conceive of. And we're paying for it with our taxes. However, Weiner also sounded the warning of the potential threat of thinking machines overtaking humans. All right, I already read that one. Weiner proclaimed that the advent of a second industrial revolution, which would bring about fully automated factories running without human assistance, and which he believed carried great possibilities for good and for evil. Cybernetic techniques and technologies, he argued, quote, open to us vistas of a period of greater plenty than the human race has ever known, although they create at the same time the possibility of a more devastating level of social ruin and perversion than any we have yet known, unquote. However, Weiner warned, quote, the skilled scientist and the skilled administrator may survive, but, quote, the average human being of mediocre attainments or less has nothing to sell that is worth anyone's money to buy, unquote. Useless eaters. Similarly, John von Neumann developed the universal constructor, a self-replicating machine in a cellular automata environment. It was designed in the 1940s without the use of a computer, The fundamental details of the machine were published in von Neumann's book Theory of Self-Reproducing Automata, completed in 1966. Von Neumann's goal was to specify an abstract machine which, when run, would replicate itself. Okay, now we're going to Ukraine. Psychotronics. The Cybernetics Institute of the Ukrainian Academy of Sciences in Kiev in 1968, in the picture there. Esalen founder Michael Murphy had made a total of 4 trips to the Soviet Union in 1971, 72, 79, and 80. The first 2 visits were privately organized, while on the last trip he came by invitation of the KGB, officially hosted by the faculty of the American Studies at Moscow University. Through the Esalen Institute, the CIA encouraged the exploration of parapsychology and psychotronics, which are linked to cybernetics through its study of the human mind in relation to psychedelic drugs, artificial intelligence, and purported psychic abilities. The term psychotronics was introduced in 1967 by Zdenek Rejdak to avoid the negative connotations of parapsychology. Rejdak was a Czech scientist, member of the Knights of Malta, and president of the International Association for Research Psychotronic, which was founded at the First International Congress of Psychics in Prague in 1973. At the Prague conference, Rejdak revealed the following about the relationship between computers and artificial telepathy from his paper titled Psychotronics Reveals New Possibilities for Cybernetics. Quote, theoretical cyberneticians are proposing at present the construction of computers that would create and would possess at least a degree of intuition. Psychotronics has a great opportunity to provide much essential knowledge about these processes and thereby to help cybernetics in solving one of the most complicated tasks, that of teaching computers to create. The point is not merely to build more perfect computers, but primarily computers with qualitatively new functions. Work is now underway on a 4th generation of computers, and a 5th generation is being planned. Therefore, it is very timely for cybernetics to include in its studies also the result of work and research in psychotronics. Accompanying the Soviets' research into psychotronics was their interest in cybernetics. Beginning in the 1950s, there was an explosion of interest in cybernetics inside the Soviet Union. Cybernetics was initially outlawed in the Soviet Union as bourgeois pseudoscience, and Norbert Wiener's 1948 book Cybernetics was condemned as contrary to dialectic materialism. However, the military in particular recognized the value of emerging computer technology and the risks of being left behind. Party leaders were soon convinced, and the Communist Party singled out cybernetics as crucial to the construction of communism, setting the stage for Wiener's triumphal visit to Moscow in 1960 to attend a mathematics conference. In 1961, just in time for the opening of the 22nd Congress of the Communist Party, the Cybernetics Council of the Soviet Academy of Sciences published a volume appropriately entitled Cybernetics in the Service of Communism. The new program vigorously asserted that cybernetics, electronic computers, and control systems, quote, will be widely applied in production processes in industry, building, and transport, in scientific research, planning, designing, accounting, statistics, and management. Soviet psychotronics attracted the attention of the Americans and was investigated by Michael Murphy of the CIA-connected Esalen Institute in Big Sur, California. In the 1960s, Murphy had begun writing to civilians in the Soviet Union who were doing research independently of the state into psychic abilities. Esalen had been aware of the Soviet interest in such things from the travels of Fritz Perls and Stanislav Grof. After Sheila Ostrander and Lynn Schroeder, authors of Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain, attended the first International parapsychology conference in 1968 in Moscow and reported on of a race for inner space in which Soviet scientists were exploring the paranormal with the hope of gaining an advantage over the US. Murphy and two of his friends traveled to Russia in 1971. Murphy and Karl Nikolaev, a well-known telepath living in Russia, experimented with another form of transcontinental information exchange. Nikolaev, who taught himself yoga through books and allegedly received telepathic transmissions in Leningrad from a controlled sender in Moscow. Murphy also, with Zuna Davitshvili, the personal faith healer of Leonid Brezhnev, and Wolf Messing, a Polish Jew immigrant who fled Poland after Hitler put a price on his head for prophesying the demise of the Fuhrer. Messing had met both Einstein and Freud in Einstein's apartment and participated in a psychic experiment they requested. In his 1982 book, An End to Ordinary History, a small group of researchers pursue psychic possibilities to the Soviet Union while being closely watched by the CIA and the KGB. When asked how much of the book was based in reality, Murphy says all of it. To use a metaphor from Star Wars, that was the dark side of the Force, explained Murphy. They were trying to develop the technology of the paranormal, clairvoyance, and psychokinesis. Nobody knows the exact figures, but certainly America put $100 million into this, and we knew all the central players. And that brings us to the door of the Stanford Research Institute. From there to ARPANET. The International Foundation for Advanced Study, and LSD. Al Hubbard. And there's Ram Dass, our good friend, Be Here Now. Allen Ginsberg, Albert Hoffman, who discovered LSD, and Stanley Krippner. Also involved was James Feidman, a former student of Timothy Leary's colleague at Harvard, Dr. Richard Albert, aka Ram Dass, who introduced him to psilocybin. And then we go to the Merry Pranksters, the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the Grateful Dead, and then from there to New York Psychiatric Institute, 1949, where Allen Ginsberg was a patient, which was headed by Dr. Nolan D.C. Lewis, the Scottish Rites Field Representative of Research on Dementia Precox. Stern also collaborated with Marshall McLuhan, taught communications and media at Harvard University's School of Education, and served as a consultant for the Rockefeller Foundation Arts Program. All right, so all of this cybernetics, starting back with the Jesuits and Teilhard de Chardin, the idea that humans aren't good enough, that we need to exceed our humanity to become the superhumans. And in order to do that, we're going to use the tools of computers and psychological phenomenon. We're going to do everything possible to give ourselves an advantage over the other guys, because we're still fighting the Cold War, right, with the Soviets, and they're bending spoons over there, so we got to bend spoons over here, right? And this, all of it, just like the nuclear arms race itself, tends to benefit those control freaks that are the Jesuits and the Freemasons and the ones that think that somehow humanity has a duty to play God. All right, guys, thanks for being with me. And, consider the idea of when we see science fiction, are we being led down the path toward this noosphere, this singularity, this idea that somehow we need to join into this great big mind together in order to get closer to God, or in order to just to improve humanity generally, because we have to conquer the universe and we got to be better than we are? And compare that to having a personal relationship with the creator, a personal relationship with your spiritual side. Consider that you might have a guardian angel. Consider that your ancestors may be in the same room with you, unseen but participating in your life. Consider that all of these possibilities are there, and we don't need Teilhard de Chardin or Robert Heinlein or H.G. Wells or Isaac Asimov to unlock the real promise of humanity.